Welcome to Brief Encounters, the DC Bar Community's podcast channel. Today's episode is part of our Wellbeing Community series, The 6 Pillars of Wellbeing, which focuses on helping attorneys thrive, both professionally and personally. The legal profession is demanding by nature, but your well-being doesn't have to be at the price of your career. This series explores the 6 pillars of wellness and their impact on attorneys, sharing perspectives, tools, and conversations that support a healthier, more sustainable legal profession. Because when you care for yourself, you're better able to care for your clients and your work. Today's pillar is intellectual well-being. Here today to discuss this pillar with me is Carlyn Schofield. Carlyn is a leadership strategist and an organizational culture expert with over 15 years of experience helping professionals thrive in high-pressure environments. At a Fortune 50 financial institution, she led initiatives to strengthen employee engagement, develop leaders, and build values-driven cultures across large, complex organizations. Carlyn is passionate about helping individuals cultivate resilience, align their work with their values, and sustain well-being while pursuing meaningful, high-impact careers. Welcome, Carlyn. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here. I can't wait to talk with your audience and with you and get into it.
All right. So to kick us off, just tell us a little bit about your background and your work as it relates to well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I've been in the corporate world for quite some time, the financial world specifically. And so when I think about lawyers and the type of folks who go into law, they're typically really high achieving people, highly successful. Your work is cognitively demanding. You're on all the time. You're rewarded for working very demanding hours, having to produce really, really high level, high quality results. It's very similar in the finance industry. So I see a lot of parallels between the two. And I think there can be this concept that more is more. So you should be on all the time. You should be working constantly. You should be steeped in what you do. And what's been really interesting to me over the last 15 years of my career is kind of really looking at that idea and seeing if it's actually true. So is it true that more is more? Is it true that giving everything, being always on is actually going to lead to higher performance? Because I know that's what people care about. They want to perform at their best. These people have a lot of clients counting on them. Same in the finance industry. We have the same thing. So the demands of the job, what's rewarded, it's really similar. And I think we need to do two things. We need to recognize how the system is set up and why it's difficult to maintain well-being within certain systems. So how might we want to change the system as a whole? But then we also can look at if you're operating within a certain system, if you're in finance or you're in law, can you recognize what are the limitations or the challenges within the system that you're in? And then as an individual, what practices can you have so that you can build a little bit more resilience and overall well-being so you can function as well as possible within it, not just at your day job, but also in your life in general. So I'm really passionate about that. I want to help people perform better at work and also live healthier lives. And I also want to help organizations as a whole be healthier because there's been this idea post-industrial revolution, there's this really mechanistic idea about work and organizations. And so if you're looking at machines, they can just continually go, 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 no problem. You have different pieces and parts and you want to get the most out of them all the time. But when it comes to organizations made up of human, biological organisms, human beings, we don't function like machines. And also our organizations as a whole don't function like machines because they are made up of people. So there's this living systems kind of idea of organizations that I'm really interested in, which is like, we have to understand that the systems that we're a part of and how every single person impacts the system as a whole, and the system as a whole impacts every single person. So we kind of have to look at them from both angles and see how we can make individual changes that will reflect in the systems and then change the system to help the individual. So that's kind of where my work has been and what I'm really excited about and passionate about, because I've seen what happens when people burn out and the unhealthy behaviors that can result from that undermine not just their individual lives, but the organization as a whole. And then I've seen what happens when people make some small but healthy shifts and how profound those changes can be. So what I hope today is that the people listening from this get a little bit of insights or best practices into how they can make those changes for themselves. And then even thinking about if there are folks who are running law firms or practices, how might they make sure that their organizations that they're a part of are actually helping people perform at their best?
Thank you for that. The tier of well-being that we're here to talk about today, this notion of intellectual well-being, how do you see that supporting lawyers who are trying to sustain their work and avoid the burnout that you talk about?
Yeah. I thought about this and I thought, man, if I was a lawyer listening to this, I'd be like, I think all day long. So,
Right.
you know, what do you mean I need to like cram more stuff in my brain? And so I think the first thing I would say is there is a difference between cognitive overload and cognitive demand and taking care of our brains in a way that's regenerative and expansive in our thinking. So when you think about a lawyer, your brain, it's your instrument to do your job, right? And if I were to compare it, I love analogies. I'm going to compare it to like an Olympic athlete. Their instrument is their body. So, do they train constantly all the time? Like, does Michael Phelps swim 24 hours a day? Absolutely not. They have a whole routine to take care of their body. If they want their body to function at its best, they absolutely work it hard and they're in the pool and they're swimming, but they have a whole routine to rest, to recover, regenerate. All of that is worked into it. So, with your profession, thinking of it like that, when you are using your brain 24/7 and you can't turn it off. So, I know feeling like you have to be available 24/7, you have billable hours, you have all these things that you're thinking about and dealing with. And when you're steeped only in your work, you tend to only be using a certain type of thinking. And that type of thinking can feel very narrow. It can be more convergent thinking rather than divergent thinking, where you're thinking kind of big and outside the box. So when you are only in one mode all the time, it's actually really detrimental to your brain. Chronic stress, lack of sleep, only thinking linearly and being steeped in legal briefs is only working your brain in one mode and it's constantly stressed out. It's not giving it a chance to kind of switch into different modes of thinking. So, what I want people listening to think about is like, it doesn't mean doing more thinking necessarily. Typically, what you need is you need a little space, you need a little rest, you need some time to regenerate and recover. The other way I want to think about it too is it's not just when you're at work, but when you're out of work. We tend to just constantly be consuming information. So when you think about your brain, you're working all day, you're constantly reading things, you're constantly working, trying to figure things out. And then when you're outside of work, how are you spending your energy outside of work? So are you scrolling online? Are you numbing? Are you ruminating? What is your mode of thinking? What is your mindset when you're away from the office? And oftentimes it's even more of rumination, more, or you're trying to numb out, but you aren't actually doing things that are going to nourish you and help you kind of maintain your clarity of mind, your curiosity, your excitement about life, about learning. So that intellectual well-being is really important because when we are constantly overloaded and overdemanded, we start to lose our focus. We can't think as clearly. It takes us longer to do certain tasks. And to come back to the Olympic analogy, Olympians, even though they have this amazing training protocol that includes rest and regeneration, they have short careers. And they oftentimes really struggle when they're over and have a hard time saying goodbye to it because they are so invested and that becomes all of who they are. So you have a much longer career than your typical Olympian. So you have to think about if your mind is your instrument, how are you going to keep it healthy and sustain this career over a long period of time without completely losing yourself? And that's what I think is really important for your audience and something to think about. And the other thing with the information, it's if you're constantly being bombarded with this information at work and then after you go home, you're scrolling and you're reading the news and all of that, it's kind of like always inhaling and never exhaling. So you're just like taking everything in and holding it in until your head wants to explode versus like an exhale. You need to give your brain a chance to exhale. So that's like creative expression. That's a conversation that's a meaningful conversation and a point of connection with someone you care about, that's like a great night of sleep. All of those things are like an exhale for your brain, and you have to give yourself that exhale if you want to be able to continue to function.
I think that's a good moment for us to talk about the small, practical, and realistic. So, if somebody's trying to identify for themselves this week, how can I strengthen this area of my well-being? How can they find those exhales, those moments in their life that are really practical, something that you could do tomorrow?
I think the first thing, honestly, is just noticing, because, like, what I want to be really careful about is giving people one more thing to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be like, you got to take up yoga and meditate. Because I know that you have a million things on your mind and a million demands on your time. So, what I would say is like start with noticing what is your frame of mind most of the time. Typically, the frame of mind that you're going to be in is sort of like the planning execution mode, rumination, numbing, those types of states of mind. You're going to have a time where you need to be focused and you need to be on and you need to perform. But you equally need a time where you can like have that second to like step back and look and gain perspective and have a little bit of an exhale. So the first thing is noticing, like, oh my gosh. One thing is when you wake up in the morning, do you feel that instant rush of panic and dread and you kind of just get thrown into your day? I know most people do. Instead of greeting the day or thinking about and being intentional about how you want to approach the energy you want to bring into your day, oftentimes it feels like we're just bracing for the day. Like we're putting on our armor and we're getting up and we're going. And we start our day with that feeling of that tight chest, all of that. So I think it's first just noticing, like, what is your state of mind most of the time? Are you constantly hamster wheel type thoughts? Are you constantly stressed out? Are you losing sleep? And then I think it's just being more mindful of the certain points in your day. So when you wake up in the morning, there's a reason why people talk about morning practices, evening practices. There's these certain times in your day where you can kind of approach them a little bit differently. So the first thing being like not jumping right in, not scrolling on your phone, like giving yourself, even if it's 5 to 10 minutes, to just breathe. Give yourself a little space to kind of think about the mindset and the energy you want to bring into your day is really, really helpful. And then the other thing I would say is like when you aren't working, what are you doing? Are you nourishing your mind or are you numbing your mind? Are you ruminating about the work you have to do tomorrow? We all have times where we aren't working, and we can either further deplete ourselves or we can actually regenerate our minds and help ourselves feel better. So, nourishing your mind might look like just getting some thoughts out instead of consuming information. If you have some form of creative expression that's been lying dormant and you can give yourself a second to, instead of consuming and scrolling, let me just write about something that, or let me just call up my sister or my friend or whoever and get something out of me. Let me vent, let me talk, let me connect. I think some of it is we take so much in and we don't do enough of getting things out. So whatever that looks like for you, find a way to like take some of that stuff that's up in your mind or up in your brain and get it out onto paper, onto a canvas with your friends. But just think about, what are those exhales? When am I taking what's within and letting it breathe? The other thing I would say is like, don't forget about what you're curious about, like that curiosity, that play that is within us. Right now, my husband's interested in the Egyptian pyramids, and are they actually tombs or are they something else? We've been like kind of diving into this mystery, but it's interesting and it's like giving us something different to talk about and connect about. And it has nothing to do with our work. It's just about being a fully dimensional human being and following your curiosity and learning something new that's kind of like fascinating and you can talk about. You don't want to become a one-dimensional, myopic person that's at a dinner party and people don't want to sit next to you because all you can talk about is your job.
Absolutely. I once heard too that those little niche interests that we develop that excite us, that keep us alive, it doesn't matter how strange they are. The woman
No.
that I was talking about this with, she really liked stickers and she had a little sticker book for herself and she was, an adult and
Right.
but it made her feel something. It moved
Yeah.
her. And
Yeah.
so I think there is something to exploring for its own sake, and that is so powerful.
I think another thing to think about is folks who have super high demanding jobs, it can easily become the only thing that they think about is like, before you had your job, you were this whole person. Like when we're kids, we're these whole people. We have all these things we're interested in. We want to play. We go to school and we learn and we do a lot of things. And many of us love school and we're high performing. But then outside of that, we have like our activities and our friends and all the things that we love. And we're these whole people. And then sometimes what happens when you have a demanding job is it starts to consume more and more of your life to where the other parts of your life suffer so greatly because you aren't investing in your relationships or your creative pursuits or your curiosity or play or anything, that you forget what did you do outside of it. And now work becomes your escape from a life that you hate because you haven't put any of your heart or soul or effort into your life. And now your work is everything. And I've also seen that where relationships fall apart or family structures suffer. And I don't want that for people either. So think about that. Don't let your work become everything, because before you know it, you forget who you are outside of it. And I don't want that for folks.
Thank you, Carlyn. So, when we're thinking about the mode that lawyers are constantly in, we are typically used to solving everyone else's problems.
Right.
So, how can we as legal professionals sort of take a step back from that go-to mentality and recognize when we are the ones who need support? Any thoughts on sort of healthy ways that we can seek out that support as professionals?
Yeah, I think lawyers tend to be heavily self-reliant. You're the people that people go to solve everything for them. So like it's really easy to kind of slip into feeling like you have to be that person all the time. And even within our culture, there's this rugged individualism that's been celebrated from like early days. So I think most of us have this pride and this sense of like it's weakness to admit or acknowledge if you need support. And I really think that's such a damaging myth because we are relational human beings by nature. Like none of us exist in a vacuum. Absolutely none of us. If you think about it, how would we do anything without one another? We wouldn't be able to learn language. We wouldn't be able to understand the world around us. Like we have to constantly think about, we are, whether we like it or not, we're not machines and we're not robots and we don't come programmed. We actually do need human connection. We do need rest. We do need understanding. We do need times to like process what's going on with us. And so I think one of the things you need to do is recognize within yourself when you're hitting burnout, because we all hit it. And I think don't ever feel like because you're having a period of time where you're struggling or things seem to be a little bit more difficult, that you're failing. We're so hard on ourselves. I often say it takes so much courage just to be a human being. And then to be a human being who has a really high pressure job in a high pressure environment with a lot of people counting on you, you layer on more and more responsibility, and it's a ton of pressure to carry. And no one is meant to carry it all alone. So the first thing is to notice like there's behaviors or there's ways that you're showing up that aren't ideal. So maybe you're rereading the same paragraph over and over again, or you just aren't as sharp as you used to be, or the words aren't coming to you like they typically did, or it's taking you longer to get things done, or you're just feeling drained and depleted. And the idea of work is just like overwhelming to you. We've all had these kinds of things happen. And all of this is just a signal that you need to do something to help yourself recover. So, prioritizing sleep is a big one. And I'll say, I know there's multiple pillars that you all are discussing on this podcast. They are inextricably linked to each other. All of them individually are something to think about, but they also all connect. So, sleep, your brain is an organ. So, it needs nourishment, it needs rest. We have to start understanding that because we don't want people to get to the point where they're in crisis. And I've seen this happen where they develop addictions or they have a nervous breakdown or they have a health crisis because they aren't taking care of themselves. And then you've thought, oh, I'm just going to ignore my health so I can function. But then you get to a point of crisis where you can't do anything and nobody can come to you for anything. So we don't want to drive people to that point, and we don't want to let ourselves get to that point. So we really need to be cognizant of that and take care of ourselves throughout. So I would say those key indicators that you can notice in yourself are probably indicators that you're burnt out and you need some help. And by help, it doesn't have to look like, going away to like an inpatient facility, or it doesn't even have to look like a therapist necessarily.
We can't all sneak off to the ashram for six
Yes,
months
we
either.
can. Yeah, you don't need to drape yourself with beads and go sit on a hillside unless you want to, and then Godspeed. But you can do it in small ways. Like you can just kind of recognize you might need to give yourself a little bit of a break. You may need to prioritize sleep. You might need to have like set some boundaries. You might need to think about how you're spending your time outside of work and how you might make it a little bit more regenerative and nourishing for yourself. You might need to connect with people. Maybe it's a peer. It might just be a conversation with someone you work with that you can kind of connect and share how you're feeling. Support can look different for different people. And maybe some people are there at the point they'd like to talk to a professional. Other people may not be there. They might just need a conversation with a friend or a peer or someone who can understand what they're going through. So give yourself whatever you can give yourself, because you have to understand what you do is very difficult and not a lot of people can do it. And so if you're doing it, you need to kind of give yourself all the resources and the tools and the care that you need to be able to, and feel zero shame about that.
Thanks, Karsh. So much wisdom there. Thank you. So, as we close out, if our listeners were to remember just one thing about intellectual well being, its importance for lawyers and our profession, what would you want the takeaway to be?
I would want the takeaway to be it doesn't have to be more to take care of your intellectual being. You don't have to think more. In fact, I would encourage you to probably do less, connect more, create more, exhale more, step back more, take a wider perspective more often. All of these things are not wastes of time. So sometimes people think it's a waste of time if I'm not doing my work and I'm thinking about ancient Egyptian pyramids. That's a waste of time. But if you look at neuroscience, it's actually when you slip into a different mode of thinking and when you engage the part of your brain that's curious and creative, you're actually doing something for your brain that's super healthy. It's a different way of thinking. It can help you make different creative connections and think differently and have more clarity of mind when you are doing your work. So that time when you're in the shower, when you're taking a walk and an idea comes to you, those moments, that's not an accident. It's actually how our brain works. It needs time to step away so that it can actually store the information and think about it and make different connections. So don't feel like you're wasting your time if you aren't constantly thinking about your work. Understand that you're doing something that's going to make you better at your work. So keeping in mind the two analogies I talked about, like the inhale and the exhale. Don't always be inhaling and expect to not want to explode. You have to let yourself exhale. So whatever that looks like for you, a conversation, creative expression, a freaking nap, whatever that is, you got to exhale. And the other one being your mind is your instrument. We know the human brain is not meant to be on all the time. Chronic stress, lack of rest, lack of generative thinking and regeneration leads to a loss of executive functioning, a loss of memory. So you're going to be worse at your job by trying to be better at your job. You have to start to think about your brain as an organ, a biological organ that you have to take care of for an entire career. And you don't want it to get to the point where it's completely burnt out. So care for it along the way in these small ways. You don't need to take up a meditation habit, although that would be great. That would be very helpful. But just think about when I'm off, how am I off? One of the things I do before I go to bed, I think about my brain just kind of floating in the cerebral fluid in my head. I just think about it as a thing. So it's sort of, rather than just being lost in my thoughts, it's a thing in my head that's thinking just like my heart is in my chest beating. But I think about it just floating there, just like zen. And it kind of like lulls me to sleep. When you can give yourself those moments, even on your drive home, like, I'm just going to let my brain float right now. I'm just going to let it daydream. you're doing something so wise and so beneficial for your brain. So I hope this is helpful. I hope people can take something away from this and use it. And then those of you who run firms, like I said, just thinking about what type of behavior you're rewarding. What are you valuing? What are you modeling for the people who work with you every day? If we care about family, if we care about community, if we care about well-being, if we care about great performance, we have to have a culture and a system that allows people to function in a healthy way within it so they can show up their best at work with their families and in their communities. So I would just challenge people to think about that and understand that letting people have some time to exhale is actually not a bad thing when it comes to performance and results. It's quite the opposite. I would just encourage folks who have the ability to influence the system to think about that as well, so we can create better systems for our folks. And as technology gets better and people can use all of these new tools, we need to think about, are our demands growing along with it, or can we use some of these tools to help our people thrive a little bit more? And I hope that we do the latter.
Thank you for your perspective. I think this is going to be so valuable for our community. So we really appreciate having you here today.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening. If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd love to have you join us. The DC Bar Wellbeing community is open to those who want to be part of building a healthier legal profession. Visit the DC Bar website to learn more and to become a member. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to Brief Encounters, and be sure to check out Toward Wellbeing, the DC Bar's Lawyer Assistance Program podcast channel, for even more conversations dedicated to your well-being. Join us tomorrow as we discuss the fifth pillar of lawyer well-being, the spiritual pillar. Take care of yourself. We'll see you next time.